So, chapter 185 was standard for WataMote in terms of the length, structure, and its mixture of comedy and heartfelt moments. The latter is typically subtle, which is why I believe this manga deserves a lot of credit for turning seemingly insignificant events into something meaningful. In the past, it happened with Tomoko going to McDonald's or whatever the fuck it was called by herself, showing an improvement in her ability to talk to strangers. It happened with Tomoko adjusting the length of her skirt, which was something that marked a new Tomoko who had gained a lot more confidence in her appearance. Here in this chapter, I could point to two scenes that demonstrate my point. The first is the main topic of chapter 185, the brand new seating arrangements. What came from this was good comedy, which I'll talk about more in detail later, but what was most important was the aftermath. Tomoko decides to sit in the back, incidentally next to Komiyama. As Hina said in this chapter, this is the same spot Tomoko sat in as a first year. However, Tomoko's perspective of life is very different now. Her intentions for choosing this seat was to take in her final days as a high schooler and observe the classroom. This is a stark contrast to the Tomoko of old, who would put her head down and try to weather out her mundane school days. The seating also gives you the feeling of the story coming full circle. We're literally back where we started, but this time the vibe is much more uplifting as Tomoko has grown. Second is Tomoko going to the library. This is something very easy to miss, and this is why I think Nico Tanigawa is a shrewd operator. I noticed that this library scene was a parallel to an occurrence in chapter 12. If you don't remember what happened then, chapter 12 was when Tomoko wanted to see the fireworks with someone and became desperate enough to ask any random student. So Tomoko chose the library as her hunting ground to identify a fellow loner. In this chapter, we see two students that were in chapter 12 as well, the guy with the glasses and the bored looking cute girl. The situations are similar by design, at least in terms of the setting, all in order to highlight one glaring difference, which is Tomoko. The atmosphere of Tomoko going to the library in chapter 12 is very different from what we got in chapter 185. Tomoko has grown past a lot of her insecurities. She's no longer a loner anymore, so she doesn't mind spending time with herself. In fact, Tomoko actually used the library as an escape from her friends, who proved that socializing with people can be just as inconvenient as the life of a loner. And that transitions me to my next point. Tomoko, it seems, is finding the value of being a loner. Initially, Tomoko thought being popular was a must, which is understandable considering her vantage point then. Even in this chapter, when seating arrangements are brought up, Tomoko believed that popular people had an inherent privilege, but the hassle of everyone trying to sit next to her showed Tomoko that popularity brings about its own issues. Now, I think Tomoko will appreciate her alone time like she never did before, due to her knowing that even if she is by herself, she has a good circle of friends, so she is never truly alone. It shows the difference of being alone by choice versus being alone by default. That about covers the serious bits. The majority of everything else in the chapter was comedy. We saw students stressing over their seating arrangements, some more than others, and even some not in the class. Of course, this being Uchi. From Uchi and Tomoko's dialogue, we got a Hunter x Hunter reference where Tomoko likened Uchi's ability to sense Tomoko within a 5-meter radius to N. And Hunter x Hunter fans, if you're watching this video, that's the closest that you'll get to a chapter this year. So cherish that moment, relish in it, whatever you gotta do. Take note of where Uchi was willing to sit too. Because Uchi's classroom is directly behind Tomoko's, she needs to sit at the front for her inability to take effect. The front seat is close to the teacher, and as Tomoko envisioned, was where super unpopular people sat. But Uchi is so obsessed with Tomoko, that issue does not faze her in the slightest. I also thought that Minami drawing a line in the sand this chapter was pretty funny. The seating arrangements quickly mutated into politics. Where you sat could make or break a relationship. Minami let Mako know, if you don't sit next to me, I'll consider it mutiny. Which for me, seeing Minami take these extreme measures shows you how desperate she has become. For her to give Mako an ultimatum like that exposes their fragile relationship and, like always, reveals the ugly side of Minami's personality. Minami is probably the only character I dislike in the series, but not because she's written bad or anything of the sort. Minami has great potential to grow as a character, in fact, because she's almost hit rock bottom, so the sky is the limit. I do wonder how Nico Tanigawa is going to use her in the future. And with the accumulation of taking Minami's shit, Yoshida deflecting responsibility, and trying to manage the task of accommodating both Hina and Yuri, we see Mako in this chapter lose her cool, which is rare. It wasn't anything major, but when we see Mako, who up to this point has been a model of politeness and composure, her yelling at Yuri and Yoshida speaks volumes about how fed up she is. It makes sense though, because her kindness is often taken advantage of. The final result of the seating arrangements gives us hope for great character interactions and certain dynamics being honed in on. Tomoko and Komi have been bickering since like volume 4 of WataMote, so their back and forth is guaranteed to be a classic. You have Yoshida and Shiki, or as Tomoko calls her, Emoji Mark II, seated together, which I have no clue what could happen there. Probably nothing, since they both are laid back individuals, at least in the classroom setting. My favorite pair though is none other than Hina and Yuri. These two aren't all that fond of each other, albeit it's more on the side of Yuri. I like this duo because I think their contrasting personalities makes for good potential growth. Yuri likes to keep to herself and stay quiet, but Hina's outgoing attitude prevents people like Yuri from staying in their comfort zone. It's similar to what we saw from Tomoko and Hina when they sat next to each other early in the series. On the part of Hina, she isn't used to girls being as brutally honest as Yuri. Hina is refreshed by Yuri's cold attitude simply because she doesn't often experience anything like that, so both of these two can grow from being seated next to each other. Lastly, it looks like, although I'm still not entirely sure, that Mako chose to sit next to some boy, which would mean that she decided to turn her back on Minami. I'm not 100% sure this person is Mako because they're wearing a vest here and Mako wasn't wearing one earlier, but it also looks like they're wearing pants, but those could be knee socks because Mako also wears those. Y'all tell me what you think. Well guys, that about does it for this review of chapter 185 of WataMote. Do not expect these videos on a regular basis because I don't think WataMote is a series that you review on a chapter to chapter basis. Discuss, sure, but reviews all the time? I don't think so. But guys, that is pretty much it for me. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm Satsuki the Savage, and I am out.
Tasting your soul, you're not in control, just giving you goals. Scared of your past, the future is closed. The start is the end is a start. They both are the same, can't tell them apart. Nigga, that's cuz the intro was the outro.